My name is Kimber Tower, and this is my project on Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher is not known primarily as a leader. In fact, when you say your name, you may even get a blank stare until you say Princess Leia. While she may be more recognizable as the bold, sarcastic leader of the Rebel Alliance, Carrie Fisher also lived out her personal life as a role model to women and as a bold advocate for the mental health community. In Carrie's own words, "If my life wasn't funny, it would just be true, and that is unacceptable." Fisher was born into a dramatic life. Her mother was Hollywood star Debbie Reynolds, and her father was crooner Eddie Fisher. She was born in 1956. Her parents had a famously tumultuous relationship involving the scandal of Eddie having an affair with Elizabeth Taylor. Debbie Reynolds married again with some disastrous financial results. Carrie dropped out of high school to perform with her mother and became a habitual drug user at the early age of 13. She was eventually diagnosed as being bipolar. Fisher was very close to her mother. They were neighbors for years prior to both of their deaths. While they had tumultuous times in their relationships, which Fisher wrote of in her semi-autobiographical book Postcards from the Edge, as they both aged, they remained intertwined in many ways. Carrie Fisher adored her mother and said as much of her when she stated, "She's an immensely powerful woman, and I just admire my mother very much." There's very few women from her generation who worked like that, who just kept a career going all her life and raised children and had horrible relationships and lost all her money and got it back again. I mean, she's had an amazing life and she's someone to admire. Fisher perpetuated that legacy of being a strong single parent as she raised her daughter Billie Lourd. Lourd said of her mother, "She told me to be true and kind and confident in yourself. She raised me to not think of men and women as different. She raised me without gender. It's kind of the reason she named me Billie. It's not about being a strong woman. It's about being a strong person. She once told me, 'I never sat you down with a credo. It was more about living by example.'" One of the most visible ways Carrie Fisher led by example was through her journey through mental illness openly. She struggled with drug addiction, which played out in the media. At the age of 28, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But her story didn't end with diagnosis. She spent the rest of her life sharing her triumphs. She let the public see her highs, and her highs, which were often lows. She allowed people to see what it looks like to live with mental illness. "I am mentally ill. I can say that. I'm not ashamed of it. I survived that. I'm still surviving it. But bring it on. Better me than you." Fisher was also outspoken about the disparity between genders, particularly in her line of work. However, she was also a realist. Her friend, and in his words, a space twin, Mark Hamill told a story in 2018 about when he, Fisher, and Harrison Ford were approached about another Star Wars trilogy. Fisher immediately said that she was in. Hamill told her the play a little hard to get, but her response was, "Mark, what kind of parts are there in Hollywood for women over 50? He went on to say, again, miles ahead of me, "She understood how you have to embrace the real estate you occupy. She came to see me on Broadway many years ago and said, 'What's with your BS bio? You didn't even mention the movies by name.' Hamill thought the critics in New York didn't care about Star Wars. She said, 'I'm Princess Leia, you're Luke Skywalker. Get used to it and get over yourself.' He added again, she leads the way." One of Fisher's goals was to be a voice for mental illness that could change public perception of those who suffer from any type of mental illness. One of the things that baffles me, and there are quite a few, is how there can be so much lingering stigma with regards to mental illness, specifically bipolar disorder. In my opinion, living with manic depression takes a tremendous amount of balls. At times, being bipolar can be an all-consuming challenge, requiring a lot of stamina and even more courage. So if you're living with this illness and functioning at all, it's something to be proud of, not ashamed of. Fisher lived with bipolar disorder well before she was diagnosed formally. She began abusing prescription drugs and cocaine in her teens. While she was filming The Empire Strikes Back, her addiction to cocaine and other prescription medications began to spiral out of control. She was able to get sober for a brief period, but relapsed and had a well-documented overdose that resulted in her being rushed to the hospital to get her stomach pumped. She used that experience in her semi-autobiographical book and the resulting movie, Postcards from the Edge. The film starred her friend Meryl Streep. When asked why she chose to have another actress play the role, Fisher stated, "I've already played Suzanne." That's the character's name from the book and the film. Carrie Fisher never had a goal to simply end her disease or the struggles that have come with them. She shared her journey with anyone who was willing to listen because she wanted them to understand mental illness, particularly bipolar disorder. She shared the scary and the ugly parts of her disease. Fisher spoke openly of how her addiction to drugs was partially because the drugs were able to offset her manic moments and temper her swings, at least a little bit. She spoke to those who loved people who were struggling with mental illness because she knew from the difficult relationship she had at times with her own family, and when someone is struggling with any form of unchecked mental illness, everyone around them is hurting. She wanted to encourage everyone to know that they didn't have to resign themselves to living that way. They could help in a loving way without judgment. If you feel like your child or friend or spouse is showing signs of this illness, if you can get them in touch with somebody else they can talk to and share their experience with, and not just feel like they're being told that they're wrong or bad or stupid, then they can relate somehow. Fisher was not one to sit back and allow the status quo to rule supreme. She was known for saying exactly what she thought when she felt like saying it. She was an outspoken advocate for gender equality. One particular topic she spoke of often was her hatred of the metal gold bikini she wore in Return of the Jedi. She once described that bikini as what supermodels will wear in the seventh ring of hell. When actress Daisy Ridley was cast as Rey in The Force Awakens, she told her to fight for her costume and stay out of another metal bikini situation. In 2015, when asked what parents could tell their children about why Princess Leia wore that metal bikini, she responded, "Tell them that a giant slug captured me and forced me to wear that stupid outfit, and then I killed him because I didn't like it, and then I took it off, backstage." Fisher's body became a topic of interest again when The Force Awakens began filming. One surprising controversy was how well she had aged or hadn't aged well. Showing her quick wit and her lack of patience with the issue, she sent out a tweet saying, "Please stop debating about whether or not I aged well. Unfortunately, it hurts all three of my feelings. My body hasn't aged as well as I have. Blow us." While many found her statement amusing, it is important to note that this sparked a conversation on the unrealistic expectations we put on women in particular as they age. She spoke out again on the Stephen Colbert Show when she said, "They want to hire a part of me, not all of me. They want to hire about 3/4, so I have to be rid of the fourth somehow. The fourth can't be with me. I made a joke. The fourth can't be with me." This was another moment that Fisher used her humor to talk about uncomfortable topics and tell the truth about it. This honesty over how her over 50-year-old body was expected to look in order to play a general in space continued the conversation of what we expect women to look like as opposed to what men are expected to look like as they age. Fisher kicked open the door to that conversation and then continued to hold it open while others joined in. It could be argued that her willingness to be vulnerable and discuss what some saw as a flaw was one factor in giving more women courage as current culture has discussed increasingly controversial topics regarding gender issues and violence against women and other vulnerable minorities. While Fisher often spoke out as a manner to take on whatever Goliath was in front of her, she also spoke to more individual and personal battles. She was one who was noted for giving others courage to survive whatever personal mountain they were trying to climb with words of support based on her own life experiences. She once said, "Do not let what you think they think of you make you stop and question everything you are." She also said, "Once it was proposed to me that it was all right to be like I am, I finally quit apologizing for it." Carrie Fisher was a woman of many talents. She was Hollywood royalty, a talented actress, and a singer. She was a published author and wrote multiple books. She was also a skilled script doctor. While this was a skill that was less visible to the public eye, she was highly sought after because of her wit and ability to improve dialogue. While she never had an issue with not receiving credit from the movies she doctored, she did expect her work to be compensated. Fisher retired from script doctoring when it became a practice to submit your work without assurance of payment. She maintained that her work deserved fair compensation. She once said, "Everything is negotiable. Whether or not the negotiation is easy is another thing." Carrie Fisher never stopped working. She often credited her mother for her work ethic. She called her mother a Sir Thriver who was able to overcome adversity and come out on top over and over again. Fisher worked alongside her mother in shows as a teen and until her mother began to retire in 2015, even singing in her mother's final show. She was always moving forward and striving for more. There is no point at which you can say, "Well, I'm successful now, I might as well take a nap." Fisher spent a great deal of time meeting with fans at different events. She was known for sprinkling them with glitter, taking creative pictures with them, and taking the time to visit a fan who needed a conversation. She shared her victories and defeats and encouraged others to do the same. She was known to have said, "You get to choose what monsters you want to slay. I'm sorry to say this again, but let's face it, the Force is with you." When Carrie Fisher passed away in 2016, the world reacted. Many felt they had lost their princess and general, and while she accepted that her legacy would be attached to Star Wars forever, she was much more to many. She showed people how one person lived with mental illness and addiction and gave them space to find their own way to live that life. We've been given a challenging illness, and there is no other option than to meet those challenges. Think of it as an opportunity to be heroic. Not, "I survived living in Mosul during an attack" heroic, but an emotional survivor. An opportunity to be a good example to others who might share our disorder. She accepted herself and gave others the power to accept themselves also. Before she died, she shared the following story about an encounter with George Lucas. "George comes up to me the first day of filming and takes one look at the dress and says, 'You can't wear a bra under that dress.' So I say, 'Okay, I'll bite.' 'Why?' He says, 'Because there's no underwear in space.' What happens is you go to space and you become weightless. So far so good, right? But then your body expands. But your bra doesn't, so you're strangled by your own bra." Now I think this would make for a fantastic obit. So I tell my younger friends that no matter how I go, I want it reported that I drowned in moonlight, strangled by my own bra. In many tributes that were written for her after her death, it was indeed listed that her cause of death was being strangled by her own bra. Her mother, Debbie Reynolds, passed away the next day. Some of Fisher's cremated remains were placed with her mother. The rest were put in a large novelty Prozac pill. Months later, when her autopsy results revealed she had cocaine and other drugs in her system when she died, her daughter, Billie Lourd, put out a statement saying, "My mom battled drug addiction and mental illness her entire life. She ultimately died of it." She was purposefully open in all of her work about the social stigmas surrounding these diseases. She talked about the shame that torments people and their families confronted by these diseases. I know my mom. She'd want her death to encourage people to be open about their struggles. Seek help. Fight for government funding for mental health programs. Shame and those social stigmas are the enemies of progress to solutions and ultimately a cure. Love you, Mombi. Carrie Fisher lived up to her hype. She was an immensely talented person who wrestled with her demons in the spotlight. But she didn't reside in a place of shame over that. She let the world see her struggles and find comfort in them. She showed a way to live with brokenness and make it beautiful. When someone asked how to live with mental illness, she said, "Stay afraid, but do it anyway. What's important is the action. You don't have to wait to be confident. Just do it, and eventually the confidence will follow."